Every fisherman needs a good fishing net. So this year, I've started making my own. We've been taking these nets with us on our adventures all across the country.
Oh, took it! Niall!
And we've had some pretty good fish in them as well.
Have you seen the size of that?
In this video, I'm going to show you how I make my fishing nets. So the first step is to make the form. So this is what you're going to bend these wood laminate strips round to actually make the frame of the net. So what I did was, I found this net insert, which I got off eBay for about £9, and then I looked at the dimensions of that particular max catch net. Obviously this is just like a plastic net or something, but once I had the dimensions of the max catch net, I could then work out how to structure the form on the MDF. So once you've done that, it's ready for the laminate strips to be bent round and glued onto the handle. So it's at this point you want to select some wood. Pine is a good cheap option and it can give a decent finish on the net, but I've found that English oak gives a much better finish. So that's what I'm going to be using for this build. Start by roughly cutting out the handle to match the form. So whilst that does look a bit rubbish at the moment, all you sort of need to worry about at this stage is getting a decent line through here onto the handle like this, so when you bend your thin bits of laminate around here, they can sit flush on here and you can glue them on and get a nice glue. All this sort of stuff isn't even, the end of the handle's not even either, but it doesn't really matter because as soon as you've got the laminates on and everything glued, you can finish all this up and make it look a bit better. So once you've cut that, you're then onto the bits of laminate. So there's loads of different ways of softening up the bits of laminate. You basically just need to soak it in water or steam it. Easiest way really for most people at home is to just soak it in water, and I really racked my brains about how to do this, whether it's put it in the bath or something similar like that, but it did just occur to me on the last build I did that I've got a pond, so why not just stick it in the pond for a day. Just gonna get the wood out of the pond, totally normal. So that's at about 24 hours now. So you find the centre point on the laminate strips, put a mark with pencil like that so you can see where the centre of each one is, and then I already know this is the centre of my jig, so you just got to line that up and then basically start clamping. So one of the more annoying things about this project is that you need a lot of clamps. Gently bend the laminate pieces around the form. Do this as carefully and as slowly as possible. This is the point where your laminate could snap. And of course if it snaps, you've got to start again. Right, so that's 90% of the way there. But all the three pieces of wood went bent round. I don't think anything snapped yet. Still might be a bit of room for snappage when we get to that bit, but next step is to, of course, use the rest of your clamps to come around here like this and clamp up all these bits where there are gaps. That's all gone in alright. All that's left to do now is to leave it for a day or two just to set. So now we're at the fun part. We've got the bits of laminate set. Obviously it's not completely in the perfect condition now, but sorry, it's not completely in the perfect position now, but you know, once we can, this is like sort of ready to be bent around that form again with very little effort. But of course we've got to start gluing it. So I'm using some wood glue. I think any decent wood glue would do, to be honest. And of course it's just a simple case of applying the glue to all the pieces on the laminate that are going to be touching. One important thing to do is get some sellotape down on these areas here. It basically just stops the form sticking to the template. Right, so that's the clamps back on. As you can see, it's all glued as well. What you want to do at this stage is just any of this excess glue, just rub that off. And of course, if there's any tiny little gaps like that, you can rub the glue into the gaps just to make sure it sticks properly. But yeah, just going to do that, and then we leave it for about 24 hours and then take it out, flip it round, and there'll be some glue on the underside which isn't quite dry. You just want to wipe that off, and then yeah, just continue leaving it to dry basically. So when you flip the net round and you're taking those excess bits of glue off, sometimes on the handle on these points here there can be gaps sometimes, depending on how well you've clamped it. There's a couple of different ways of sorting that. You can obviously use wood filler, which is pretty good, but I find the best thing to do is collect some of the sawdust from some of the cutting you've been doing earlier, mix it with PVA glue and rub it into the gaps, and then once that's dried, that'll sand down and it'll obviously be the same colour as the rest of the wood on the net. Right, so now that everything's glued up, next thing to do is neaten up down here. So you can already see I've drawn some sort of rough pencil lines on where I want to cut. Obviously all this stuff down here from the laminate is well, you don't need it basically. So I'm going to cut down along this line here as well, just to make it a bit more symmetrical. And then on the end here as well, obviously it's totally uneven at the moment, but what I've done is I've followed the line down here and here, done a straight line down like that just so I know where it's symmetrical, and then I'm just going to sort of freehand really just cut round here and make that into sort of a rounded edge. But yeah, that's about it. And then of course just I'm going to neaten this up a little bit as well, but yeah, should take me about 20 minutes on the jigsaw, but yeah, see how this goes. Right, so fairly happy with that. That's pretty much gone how I hoped it would go. Now, next job is to plane off the glue and even up the edge of the net. So once you're happy with the shape of the handle, you can use a router and a round over bit around all the edges of the net, and that basically just does what it says on the tin, a round over bit really. It basically just takes off that hard 90-degree edge around the bits of wood and gives it a smoother finish. So that does end up with things looking a little bit scruffy, but a bit of light sanding, sort all this out, So I'm going to start off with a 40 grit and then move down to, I think that's about 120. So after you've sanded, this is the point where you really start to get to see how the net's going to look. You know, there's no scruffy edges. This is pretty much how your net's going to look, only without varnish. It's the first point, I think, in the whole process where it looks a bit like a fishing net. I mean, it also looks a bit like a tennis racket, but you know, it's this is the bit. If you've got to this stage, then you're doing all right. So one further step I like to do at this point is chisel the inside of the handle just here. So I do this to sort of basically because it looks good, but it's a good way of indicating which is the top part of the net, if you know what I mean. I mean, you can use it both ways, of course, but what I do is I chisel along here and then sand it, smooth it off, and that seems to give quite a good finish.
Using a groove cutting chisel, chisel a small recess into the outside of the net. This is where the thread is going to sit after you've sewn in the net insert. A light sand, and then you're on to drilling the holes for the thread.
This top bit here is going to sit like this around here, and you're going to have a hole that comes through here as well, and the thread just comes round and holds that in place like that. So all you need to do, it's a little bit fiddly, but it's fairly self-explanatory, but you just want to use your clamps, clamp the actual net insert onto the net handle, and then go around, make sure you're happy with where all the holes are, and then drill the holes, ready to sew the net in. So, varnishing, when you finally get the varnish on this bit of the wood, you really start to see how nice the wood is going to look and how nice your net's going to look. So this is one of my favourite parts of the whole build. You want to get the varnish on, like a nice even coat across the whole net. And then leave that to dry. First coat you put on it'll probably go off in like half an hour or something, but as you put more and more coats on, it does take longer for the varnish to dry, of course. In between each varnish, you want to do a very light sand, just to make sure there's no sort of splodges of varnish or any points where it's not even or anything like that. And you want to do this about 7 times, because, you know, let's face it, if you want a net like this, it's going to be attached to your back or your side or something like that, and it could be in a river all day. So it needs to be pretty resilient, really. So 7 coats, and that should do it. So once you've done that, it's then a case of sewing the netting.
Using a lighter, seal one end of the thread to the outside of the net. You can then stitch the net insert to the net frame. One final thing I like to do is to add an eye screw into the end of the net. You can then add a quick release system which allows you to use the net while you're in the river, as demonstrated by Jamie. Just going to demonstrate the quick release system, Jamie.
Scoop the fish.
Perfect.
That's on.
What more could you want?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks very much for watching. And yeah, we'll see you next time.